Sooo is a little bitch. What's going on, guys? So after my Clannad review, I realized that some reviews are gonna need a little bit extra attention. Because more often than not, when I'm doing my reviews, I'm trying not to spoil them, so that leaves a lot of material that isn't used. And that's what this video is for. Keep in mind, not all of my videos are gonna have a companion video like this talking about spoilers, but a few are. So with that spoiler warning out of the way, let's jump right into my thoughts on Gurren Lagann. First off, let's talk about the first half of the series, because that's where most of my complaints were, and I don't think I was able to necessarily completely explain them all. First off, the first 3 episodes, they're fine. They set up the world, they set up the characters, although I do have one complaint. In the second episode, we find out that Kamina's father died, and I feel like that reveal could have taken a little bit more time. So I think what they could have done to fix that is maybe have Katan talk to Kamina and be like, oh, I met a guy that looks a lot like you, and then Kamina's like, oh, my dad's out there. And over the course of the series, like the first half of it, have Kamina slowly realize that his father did a bunch of good stuff around the world and people knew him, but he ended up dying. As opposed to just kind of getting it out of the way in episode 2, very unceremoniously. That's the word I'm looking for, very unceremoniously. After those first 4 episodes, we get into like the generals and all that stuff with the Spiral King, which is fine, but the generals had like no plot. They had no backstory. I mean, we knew there was some stuff with them in Viral, like they taught him about honor and fighting and stuff, but it was never really clarified. They never had a character. They were just kind of the bad guys, which I guess is okay, but it left me really underwhelmed, especially the fact that the very first general is the one that kills Kamina. More spoiler alert, but yeah, the first general kills Kamina. Why? How? Why couldn't he have at least like lived until the peacock guy or the water girl? Like he had to die at the very first one. That is another kind of, I mean, the episode itself is good. It's fantastic. It's shot very well. It's drawn very well. It's all very well done. It's beautiful. But I just feel like he should have survived a little bit longer. I totally get that Simone had to fight the Spiral King on his own, and he had to start doing stuff on his own and branching out and becoming a man. That makes sense, especially for where the second season leaves off. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like Kamina, he deserved better than that. Come on. I mean, honestly, if you really think about it, Kamina kind of died to a throwaway villain, a guy who had no plot, no progression, was just there to be bad, and that kind of sucks. Alright, now that my feelings on the episodes are out of the way, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the characters. Most of the ones I didn't really touch on, like Katan and Sooo, so on and so forth. First off, I'm going to talk about Katan, or as I like to call him, Kamina Light. Basically, he has the same kind of character as Kamina, that sort of manly bravado thing going on, except he's dumber. That's his entire character, like in a nutshell. And that's fine. I mean, he works for the series. He kind of takes over Kamina's place in terms of like humor and dialogue after Kamina dies, and that it's fine, whatever, I don't really care, but the main problem I have with Katan is his love story with Yoko. You see, when Yoko and Kamina fell for one another, it made sense. They'd been like bantering throughout the entire series, the first 8 episodes at least, and like it showed that Kamina really liked Yoko, or like that he was at least physically interested in her, and then in the bathhouse episode, it showed that she had some feelings back, and I guess that's the only purpose, in my opinion, that the bathhouse episode had at all. But, I mean, there was something there was some spark, and you could tell, and you kind of wanted to explore it a little bit more, and they tried to, but then he died. With Katan, at least at the beginning, there was no spark, and this was made abundantly clear during the beach episode, when she was, like, in her swimsuit, and so was everyone else, and Katan, and, like, all the other guys weren't paying attention to Yoko. If there was ever a time to show interest in Yoko, Katan should have been like the one guy who was paying like attention to her and showing interest in her. That would have set it up for later on when they kiss and stuff, but that didn't happen. So, I mean, up until they kiss, there's really no anything between them. There's no spark. There's no anything. And so it felt very out of place and very weird. And like, just, how do I put this? Basically, that storyline, the kiss and him like going off and saving the day, which was another great death scene, the way he actually used his brain and did something great for the team, that was great. But the problem lies in him and Yoko. It didn't fit. It didn't make sense. It was just like, oh, we need another romance. Let's throw that in. And yeah, it felt a little... Next up, we have Sooo. I cannot reiterate this enough. Sooo is a little bitch. For everyone who's seen it, you already know how the storyline goes. He basically grew up in an underground village like Kamina and Simone, except they prayed to a gunman, and they like sent people out of the village whenever they reached a population of 50, right? That was their thing. Keep the population small because they only had enough stuff to handle a certain population, right? That's how it worked. And then he was saved by Kamen and Simone. He went with them. After Kamen had died, he began piloting Gurren, which, honestly, why? Anyways, I'll get to that in a second, but the point is, in the second season, he basically becomes the priest guy from his village. And I get it, like, his storyline's coming full circle. He's becoming the thing he despised, but it doesn't make sense. We know that if the human population reaches a certain point, the anti-spiral is gonna come down and rain fuckery everywhere, right? Well, the thing is, Rossiu, he knows this, everyone knows this, and he's like, oh, let's keep the population under so the anti-spiral doesn't come. Why? That's the part that doesn't make sense to me. Because in the first season, everyone was afraid of the Spiral King and the generals, and Simone bested them. He bested every adversary that came their way. So why would Rossiu think that he wouldn't be able to do it again against this new threat? I mean, now they have more people, more suits, more everything. Like, they have come up in the world. They are like a military force now. So why wouldn't Rossiu, like, back Simone, at least for the time being? I feel like it's completely fine for Rossiu to become a turncoat and kind of go against Simone, but it had to happen at the right moment. And the right moment to me is when Simone did try to fight the little anti-spiral things and they blew up the city. That's when Rossiu like implemented his plan. And he was like, oh, I'll completely screw over Simone and put him in prison. That's when he implemented it. But the inklings of what his thought process, that stuff happened way before. Like, from the first episode of season 2, you knew Rossiu was kind of shady. You knew that he wasn't agreeing with Simone. He wasn't backing him up. That shouldn't have happened because he had no reason not to believe in Simone. He had no reason not to back him up. Until then. At that point, that's when that thought process should have started happening. And it could have happened very quickly, but it should have happened then. Because up until that point, like, Rossiu has no reason not to believe in Simone whatsoever. I don't know, I just feel like the pacing of, like, how he turned and why he did what he did was really off, and it didn't make sense, and he had no reason to think that way at that point. Then there's Buta, or the pig mole, if you want to call him that. Now, if you've seen the show, you already know this, but in the final fight versus the anti-spiral, Buta becomes a human. Like, everyone gets put into this weird dream state, and Buta becomes a human. And I kind of liked it at first, because Buta had spiral power, and he was actually more helpful than Yoko. If you think about it, throughout the series, he was literally more helpful than Yoko. And so in this episode, while everyone's in their dream state, he goes like all super spiral and becomes like half human, half pig mole. And he talks to the anti-spiral. And I was like, oh cool, Buta's like getting a reward for being so awesome. He gets to be a human. They're Pinocchioing him. But that's not what happened. As soon as everybody came out of their dream state, he went back to being a pig mole. And this kinda sucked. Because prior to that, Buta was talking and walking around and being a human. And it felt like a reward, like a justification, like, oh look, he gets to be a person now because he's so awesome. But then they take that away the second another person is there, and I think I know why they did that. They made Buta a human so we could understand him, so he could speak to the anti-spiral, so he could have verbal dialogue, and it's kind of a cheap way out, if you ask me. I just think that he should have, just like Kamena's death, should have had better. My last real issue in terms of characters that I can think of off the top of my head that I haven't talked about in either my normal review or this one is Viral. Now, as I said before, Viral's probably my favorite character, but while I was editing and writing the script, my co-editor, John, you'll hear from him in a minute, he brought up a really good point about Viral, and I'll just let him explain it.
Hey everyone, Jonathan here. I'm talking to you today about what I liked and didn't like about Viral. So, Viral himself is an amazing character. I'm not the biggest fan of that kind of character trope, the enemy/underdog that always gets beat down and comes back just to get beat down again, but for Viral, I really feel that they did him well. What makes Viral pop for me is his honor. Honor is a staple and it is shown in so many of his actions. His desire to beat Kamina, his desire to follow his superior's orders, even the fact that after Kamina dies and Simone takes up the mantle, Viral treats Simone as an honorable opponent, even if he does refer to him as a cub. There were many different villains and a lot of them were stronger than Viral, but because of Viral's honor, I feel this put him leagues above any other adversary that Simone faced. I also think that it's awesome that his perspective switches and he goes from defending his kin, the Beastmen, in the first half, to defending the humans who just wanted to be left alone in the second half. It's another point that speaks to his honor. After obtaining immortality at the end of the first season, you would think the Gainax would have done something a lot better with him. Something I did not like was how they ended his story. I think they ended Simone perfectly, I think they ended Nia perfectly. I'm not a huge fan of what they did with Yoko, but you know, Yoko is Yoko. Point A to point B, you know what I mean? Viral, on the other hand, had so much potential. He is immortal. His duty, his job, the reason he was made immortal was so that he could tell future generations about the victory of the Spiral King, and how the rebellion against him was futile. As we know, this was not the case. The Spiral King was utterly defeated, and the humans thrived. Now, I think that Gainax missed out on a huge opportunity here. By the end of the series, Viral is a lieutenant or general or some other such thing, something up there in the Space Armada. They don't really touch on him more than that. He gives a command, the camera pans up, and then that's the end of him. And I think that's absolutely ridiculous. I feel they should have skipped thousands of years into the future. He should have been the ending scene of the anime, where he's this great sage and people from all around know who he is, and he freely spreads the story of how Simone and Nia and the Spiral King and everyone who lost their lives fought in this great spiral war against the anti-spiral, and that it ended with the humans becoming triumphant. I thought this would have been an amazing idea. One, because, Viral's awesome and it would just be cool to see him reach that amazing stature of ancient sage. But two, because it shows a very interesting juxtaposition between what the Spiral King wanted and what actually happened. It's a play on words here. The Spiral King says, "I gave you immortality so you could tell the story of the Spiral King's victory." At the time, you could see this as his victory over Simone, but by the end of the war, it turns out that his victory is over the anti-spiral. Then there's also the rebellion being futile. The humans by this point had rebelled against Simone because shit was going to shit and they needed a martyr. But in the end, that was futile, because Simone still went out to fight for humanity, simultaneously crushing the anti-spiral and saving humanity, who then welcomed Simone back with open arms. Having Viral tell this story for all of time would have been amazing, but instead they were just like, nope, he's just a general, whatever, alright, bye. It was lame, especially for how great the second half of Gurren Lagann was. I just feel overall they could have done a lot more with Viral. I feel for all his presence in the first half, they could have thrown him a lot more into the second half spotlight. They threw Buddha into the spotlight, and I couldn't help but think, what the fuck is this shit? I don't give a fuck if he's a human now. Oh, and look, he just fucked up, and now he's trapped in his own special world now too. Oh wait, he's fine. It didn't make sense. Well, it made sense, but it's stupid sense. Anyway, so that's my rant on Viral. If you agree, comment, whatever. If you don't, whatever, I don't care. Anyway, back to Shintao, because this is his thing, and I've already taken up enough of his time. Peace.
Thank you, John.
Hey, no problem, man.
So with all that out of the way, there's one more thing I do want to talk about, and that's the comparison of Gurren Lagann to Kill la Kill. I feel like that's the major comparison. People are like, oh, Gurren Lagann and Kill la Kill are so similar, and Kill la Kill stepped on Gurren Lagann, and in a way they're right, but it's not the way everyone thinks. Yes, there's the fan service and the animation style and the bright colors, but that's what Gainax/Trigger at this time was kind of known for, so you can't really say that it was a Gurren Lagann thing that they stepped on because it was their style. No, what they stepped on wasn't the way it looks or the fan service. What they stepped on was the villain structure. In Gurren Lagann, you have the 4 generals, right? And they're kind of just throwaway villains that work underneath a bigger villain. In Kill la Kill, you have the same thing. You have the 4 student body people who are under Satsuki, and she's the villain, but she's not really the villain. Her mom is. She's kind of a good guy who's doing bad things for the right reasons. Same thing with the Spiral King. It's the exact same villain structure of like a 4-1-1 thing that they did with 4 little guys, 1 big guy that you think is the big one, but it's not. It's the one above them. That's the exact same structure. So, I mean, that's how I feel they're most similar. Really, if I was going to compare Gurren Lagann to anything, it would be Fully Cooley, and not just because of the mechs, although yeah, that helps. My main comparison to Fully Cooley is the journey that the heroes go on. Both Simone and Naota are young boys that are just reaching puberty. The difference being that Simone's kind of been resigned to his normal everyday humdrum life, whereas Naota wants a change. He's like, oh, this place is so boring. And at that point, when Simone's resigned and Naota wants change, a girl comes in and changes their entire world, showing them that there's more to the world. And because of this girl, they both go on a journey and mechs happen and blah blah blah. The main difference being that, Naota decides not to go further into his journey, not to reach the limits, the full limitation of what his journey offers. He decides to stay home and go back to his humdrum life, where Simone decides not to be resigned to his humdrum life like he was at the beginning and goes on his epic journey. And it's a very similar storyline with 2 characters of differing perspectives. Alright, quick edit there, a little behind the scenes action, had to change some stuff, the frame might be different, don't know. Anyways, last thing I wanted to bring up are the things that I liked about the show, like the ending. First off, anime has this weird trope of like the 2 main characters or the 2 main love interests never getting together, and even if they do, they rarely if ever say I love you, which is odd to me. Maybe it's just a Western culture thing because it's so prominent in the United States to say I love you to somebody that you care about, and like, you know, we have the romance movies constantly doing it, that it seems odd for anime to not do it. And that's part of the reason I like Gurren Lagann so much, because at the end, Simone and Nia break that trope. They actually say I love you, which is kind of rare for, well, incredibly rare for, it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. Gurren Lagann did it. So I appreciate that. They broke the trope. They did something that the fan, like I said, fan service. It's all about servicing the fans. The fans wanted to hear that. They wanted to see it happen. They wanted to see the marriage and the kiss. They gave them everything. So for me, that ending, particularly with those two, was perfect. Then you have the very end with Simone kind of leaving the group and going off and, I guess, having his own adventure, or just doing his own thing. And this was very important to me because the whole entire series was like, don't believe in the Kamina that believes in you, believe in yourself, blah, 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 blah. It was all about be Simone, don't be Kamina. But the whole time, it seems like he was building up to just be like a Kamina clone until the very end. At the very end, we see that Kamina had an influence on his life, but he didn't become Kamina because he walked off with Buta, and like we never saw him again until the very end with the little boy in the coconut, and he still had his drill. And he was teaching the boy to drill. So we went back kind of to the beginning, to Simone the digger, not Simone the captain of Daiguren. He wasn't that Kamina clone. He wasn't reaching for the stars anymore. He went back to his roots. He went back to being a digger. He went back to being Simone. And I really, really kind of, I mean, it fits. It fits. And I felt like that was a beautiful job. How can I fuck up a line when I'm unscripted? This is amazing. I am phenomenal. I guess I should say one more thing about Yoko that I couldn't mention in the review because it was super spoilery, and that is her transition in the second season. Basically, she leaves Team Gurren to go become a teacher. Why? I think there was some point in episode 5 when they met Rossiu where like the children were around her, but they kind of played it up as a fan service angle, and somebody told her something like, oh, you're good with children, or children like you. I could even be imagining that, but I vaguely remember one like off-kilter line about that. Was that supposed to be foreshadowing that she'd be a teacher? Because that doesn't make sense. It was entirely too offhanded and weird to make any sense for me. So the way I see it is basically in season 2, everyone like goes off to Kamina City and everything's like getting better and they're building up society, but then Yoko just leaves to become a teacher out of nowhere and then comes back when they need her. And that to me goes to show the whole problem with Yoko. She fucks off until they need her for the storyline. They really didn't even need her. They just brought her back for the fans because she didn't do a whole lot in the final fight or like leading up to it. She basically kissed Catan and had a dream. And like I said, that's like her whole issue. The writers have no idea what to do with her. So literally in season 2, they don't even try to hide it. They just say like, fuck off, you become a teacher. And then she does. And then she comes back. It felt really, really, really unnatural and really odd. I mean, I liked the episode where she was teaching the kids and then they had that recreation scene of her looking over the world with the kid in the tree. That was cool, but it still didn't make sense for her character. She was like a fighter. She was like sniping people and stuff. Like, why? Sitting here recording this, I'm completely off script, and I feel like there was more to say, but I can't really remember it since I'm off script. So if there's anything else that you guys want to touch on, anything I should have touched on, let me know in the comments below and we'll hash it out. Before I go, I definitely want to give thanks to John. He was kind of my co-writer on this episode and he helped me gather some assets for the editing. I couldn't have done it without him. So if you guys kind of want to know who this John character is, there's going to be a link in the description to his review of Gurren Lagann, which differs slightly from my own, but it's a great read. Check it out. Anyways, guys, I think that's about it for me. Again, if I missed anything or if there's something you want to discuss, let me know in the comments below, and we'll definitely have a discussion. Later, guys.